I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story and welcome to the first Friday in April. Tonight, we're going to talk about getting money back from the government. Now, I know it kind of sounds like one of those too good to be true scams, but not in Oregon. We like to be national leaders on a lot of things, and one of them is the way the government actually gives money back directly to taxpayers if it collects more than was expected. Now, some people love that law. Others think that is crazy. Either way, it is our big story tonight. I think sometimes when we talk about a kicker, people think maybe we're discussing a football player or maybe someone from the soccer, maybe even MMA. No. In Oregon, the kicker relates to state finances. We got into that a little bit last night, but after our brief explanation, we got this call from a viewer.
I just finished watching the story about the budget with Elizabeth Steiner. I still don't understand, and I don't know how you can explain the kicker. Money in, money out, and why don't we spend that money on early childhood education or vaccine programs or something of that nature rather than giving it back? I understand it has something to do with the initial projection, but it still doesn't make sense to me.
All right, well, that's a great point and a great question. And we knew that if there was one smart viewer brave enough to call in and say, I don't get it, there's probably a good number of you in the same boat. So let's dig in a little deeper on Oregon's kicker law and ensure that we all get it. Back in 1979, the Oregon legislature passed the 2% kicker law. Here's how it works. Before the state's two-year budget starts, super smart folks in the government's numbers office get out their crystal ball and take a highly educated guess on how much tax money will come into the state during those 2 years. It's sort of like a game show. If the actual tax amount is less, well, everyone loses. Lawmakers have to cut budgets and everyone frowns. If they are pretty close to their guess, then lawmakers have the amount of money they expect and everything is fine. But if the actual tax revenue amount is more, 2% more or above, then taxpayers have hit the jackpot and everyone gets some of their tax money sent back until the amount above 2% is used up. Like that animation? In simpler terms, if the state thought it would have $100 in tax revenue, for example, but it actually got $105, well, that would mean that revenues were 5% more than initially projected. That means the kicker would kick in and taxpayers would get some of their taxes back. Now, how much you get back is based on your income level, and a lot of people take issue with that part of the law. It basically means that rich people get more back from the government and lower income people get less. And that's simply because those who made less paid fewer taxes. The kicker doesn't just show up as a check in the mail, by the way, every 2 years. It's given back to taxpayers as a credit on the state tax return. There is a bill in the legislature this session to return the kicker as a check in the mail, but it's been toiling away in a Senate committee since late February, and we're pretty sure it's really dead. So the kicker will likely show up on next year's tax return, and there is a caveat as well that we'll get to in a moment. But I want to show you the amount this kicker has been over the past few decades. This is a table showing the history of the kicker since its inception in 1979. Remember, in order to have a kicker, there needs to be a surplus, and it needs to be more than 2% of the expected revenue. You can see there was not a surplus in the first few years, but tax money then poured in during the mid to late 80s, and the number on the far right of the screen, that's the average kicker return to taxpayers, well, keeps kind of going up. See how that number grew in the mid to late 90s as well, with kickers between $100 and $300 per person. And here's that same list for the past 20 years or so. Again, it's helpful if you look to the far right side. The state found itself underperforming for most of the 2000s, but ever since 2013, well, things have been pretty good as far as the forecast, been coming in above the forecast. The latest number available being over $900 back for taxpayers. That's on average. Some people got more, some got less. And at that point, the surplus was around $1.6 billion. Well, this time around, they're talking about the surplus being maybe as much as $4 billion, meaning the kicker could be really big, by far the biggest ever, perhaps a couple $1,000s back for each taxpayer. But here's the caveat I mentioned. Lawmakers could, and I stress could, choose to raid the kicker fund to use on priorities or projects instead of sending the money back to you. And for those of you who are already familiar with Oregon's kicker, you let us know last night your thoughts on that law.
I pay taxes every year. So why shouldn't I get a state kicker tax every year?
All right, fair question. Janice says the state should give it to taxpayers. Consider it an economic stimulus. I personally don't like the state hanging on to that money. It was originally called a kicker for a reason. And many of you think the money should be used for state priorities instead of getting it back when you file your taxes. Matt says, it seems to me that our legislators are more interested in providing this kicker than in addressing the homelessness, drug crime crisis, or rebuilding rural homes destroyed in wildfires. Let's jeopardize our residents so our wealthy cronies can get some cash back in their greedy little hands. James chimed in saying, since Oregon has billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of unfunded building, road and bridge maintenance and seismic retrofit work left to do, I do not think there should be any kicker returned to anyone until all of that work has been completed and signed off as done. John has a plan of his own, 25% used for the I-5 bridge, 25% for homeless housing, and 50% returned as kicker refunds. We all need to pay for a safe and secure bridge as well as helping resolve the homeless crisis, which will also make us more safe and secure. Let's get something done.
I would like to submit that $4 billion that we potentially would get back as a kicker, they use that to help build the bridge instead of using bonds for it, and we just get the thing done. And I think Washington should be a big part of that, and the federal government should be a part of that. And then that takes care of that, and then we don't have to have tolling on the bridge.
I think the kicker ought to be used on the bridge project and not having a toll, but just use any kicker money for maintenance and bridge building.
All right, thanks for those comments. Several of you think some of the surplus should be used to help with the I-5 bridge. That's what you heard those two comments say. That's something that I talked with Senator Elizabeth Steiner about. She's the co-chair of the Ways and Means Committee that helps make all the money and budget decisions. You're going to hear us mention, by the way, third rail. It's a term that means if you touch it, if you mess with it, politically, you're dead. Okay? The kicker is extremely popular with the public.
There are other places we could find $1 billion, but if you think tolling's the third rail, talk about the kicker.
Right.
Because there's $3.7 billion sitting in that kicker. And people are talking about whether that should be going back out, especially since it's pretty regressive. And rich people get a lot of it, and poor people don't get much at all.
It is the one, third rail.
It's the third rail.
In Oregon.
And frankly, I'm a little baffled as to why really wealthy people should be getting back a lot of money instead of the state having to pay debt service on that many bonds.
Well, I'm not one of those, but they would tell you, I think, that because they paid so much more tax in.
Uh-huh. And they're going to be getting more benefit from the bridge.
Well, not necessarily. Not if they don't go across it.
Everybody benefits from the bridge, Pat.
From the commerce and all that?
From the commerce. If we don't have that bridge, our agricultural producers in Eastern Oregon, our grass seed farmers down the valley, our wineries, all those people, our chip manufacturers, they all need that bridge. They all need it. And if we don't build that bridge and it goes down, not only can we not get across the Columbia, we can't navigate the Columbia because it blocks the entire channel.
So time will tell what happens with the kicker this year. Thank you, Senator Steiner, for those comments. By the way, when she looked away, it was somebody who was saying, hey, we need you for a vote. We'll be keeping a close eye on the lawmakers in Salem to see if there's any indication that they plan to use that surplus for other projects. In the meantime, we want to know what you think. What should be done with that surplus? Do you think it should be in your tax return next year, or should the state use it? Save it? Whatever. Let us know. Send an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090.